Ladies and gentlemen, we are about 1/3 of the way into the 2024-25 Premier League season. 11 games in, the league is starting to take shape. As we know, Liverpool lead the way. Arsenal and City the last few weeks have faltered to an extent. Nottingham Forest look exceptional. United are about to start the Amorim era. Teams in the relegation zone are starting to try and figure it out. It's been a pretty exciting season, I would say, for the most part, depending on who you follow, of course. But I thought now would be an appropriate time to kind of draft up what I consider to be the Premier League team of the season so far. Now, one thing I always tend to find with these team of the seasons, and mine will probably be quite similar, is that the team of the season at the end of the year obviously is going to look much different to how it does now, because I feel towards the end of the year, we always kind of give more stock to the players who are kind of challenging for the league. So for example, the last season, you probably had 9 players that played for Arsenal and City, and then maybe 2 from Liverpool, or most times you have it from almost one team entirely. But at this point in the season, I think it gives us a chance to appreciate and give shout outs to players that have had a really, really bright start to the season. And that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to give you guys my honorable mentions as well, too, for certain positions. Some of them don't even need one. But with all that being said, this is my Premier League team of the season so far. Now, in goal, I think there's a few candidates. I want to give a massive shout out to Nottingham Forest defensively in general. In fact, at the point of recording, they have the best defensive record in the entire league. They've conceded less goals than anybody. And of course, that is down to a defensive unit. It's not just down to one man. And that's why I gave massive consideration to Sells. I also actually gave consideration to Andre Onana. And look, United are not going to have anybody in my team. Spoiler alert. But if I do have to give anybody a bit of credit, I think Onana does deserve some. Like, he came under a lot of stick last year, and to be honest with you, I wasn't really too convinced by him at times last season. But if I have to be absolutely objective here, I think he has kept United in some games that, quite frankly, without him, I think there's a good chance we would have lost. But I have decided to go for David Raya. Now, Arsenal defensively, the last few seasons have really made it a stamp of their team. Like, their identity is based on their defensive structure. But this year, defensively, they have been conceding more goals than they have in previous years. At the time of recording, I think they may have conceded just as many goals as United, if not one less. But despite Arsenal conceding a few goals more than they typically do, I don't think any of that really has to do with Raya, who, especially in the early weeks of the season, was tremendous in my opinion. I think in particular of the game against Aston Villa, where I personally believe Aston Villa were unlucky to come away with a loss in that game, because the amount of chances they created was enough to win it in my opinion. But David Raya on the day was just so formidable, and the save that really stands out to me in particular is the one on Ollie Watkins, the double save. I think it was quite good against Brighton as well too. He was good against Spurs, good against City. I think he's had a very, very good season. It's not just his saves, by the way. I think when it comes to actually cross-claiming, there aren't many in world football, I believe, that are as good at leaving their line and claiming crosses as well as David Raya. So I'm going to give a shout out to David Raya there. I think he has been the most impressive goalkeeper, in my opinion, so far this season in the Premier League. At right back, again, a few candidates. I think Trent hasn't had his most impressive season per se in terms of attacking returns. There have been seasons where he's been much more prolific in terms of his assists, his goals. But I would actually say this is one of the most impressive seasons I've seen Trent have defensively. I think that's always been a question mark, rightly or wrongly, around his name. But I think this season defensively, it's very difficult to kind of poke holes at him. I think against the best wingers in the league this season and in Europe, Trent has kind of held his own. So I think he's definitely a candidate for this position. And actually, United, again, I would give Mazraoui, one of the new signings this year, some credit in the bank as well too. I think he's been the most impressive summer signing so far for them. Dependable, can play either on the left or on the right. But I've actually decided now to go for Nottingham Forest, who have the best defensive record in the league, and I've looked towards Ola Aina in that respect. Now, this is somebody at the start of the season I kind of pointed out as, for me, one of the most underrated players in the Premier League. And I just don't think he really ever gets his dues. He's very dependable. He's very reliable, ever present. And this season, he's actually added some returns going forward as well too. So Forest have been brilliant. I think defensively they've been so strong, and Ola Aina is very, very difficult for the best wingers to kind of get the best out of him. He's good on the overlap. I just think he's a very, very good fullback, and I think he's been one of the more impressive ones this year. Now, on the other side, I've gone for Josko Gvardiol. Now, I think Cucurella definitely deserves a shout here, although in recent weeks it has kind of been Malo Gusto playing on the left in terms, sometimes Reece James as well too, and Anthony Robinson and Kirkez on Bournemouth as well too. There's been a few very good left backs in the league this year. But I think Josko Gvardiol is the pick of the lot. And I look at City this year defensively, I think they've been an absolute mess. And I look at so many games that they've conceded so many big chances. I think defensively, this is the weakest I can remember City being in a few years. However, I think Gvardiol is the one guy, and we're only looking at his defensive returns here, right? I think he has been the one City defender that can really hold his head up high this year. I think the rest of them have honestly been so poor. But Gvardiol, every single time I watch him, is so steady, for me, he really has no weakness in his game. He's good in the air, he's quick, he's athletic, he's strong. And that's only talking about the defensive side of the game. He reads the game exceptionally well. But then you look at his attacking this year, and he's kind of started where he left off last year. In the opposite box, he's a threat, man. Whether it's headers, whether it's long shots off his right, he's come up huge from Exeter City in that regard. I don't think there's a better left back. And I know that's the weird thing is it's not even his actual position, right? He came to City as a center back at Leipzig and for Croatia, but Pep has fully converted him into a flying left back, and he's done such a great job in that role. Now, center backs, I'm sorry, I got no honorable mentions because I think the two center backs that have taken over the league this year have been Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk. Last year, I think we looked at Saliba and Gabriel as the best partnership, not only just in Europe, but arguably in the world. I think Van Dijk and Konate have taken that title off them. The two of them have been so imperious in the center of defense for Liverpool. And I think when I think of most athletic center back partnerships in world football, I think they're number one. And to be honest with you guys, I can't think of many more athletic center back partnerships that I've ever seen. The two of them in terms of size, stature, speed, strength, commanding their area, dominance, they almost check every single box from a physical aspect that you can really ask for. Konate, if I was an attacker, if I was one-on-one against Konate, or if I was in a foot race against Konate, or we were going after a ball 50-50. Look, I'm not going to be a professional player, so I'm allowed to say this. I wouldn't go 100% in. I would be backing out a little. That guy is physically dominant. And then we know of Van Dijk, right? This guy's reading of the game, his intelligence in the air, absolutely imperious, still holds that air of aura, that air of dominance. And I think the two of them together are, at the moment, the most complete center half partnership in the Premier League. So I think they're a no-brainer in that role. Defensive midfielder has gone to who I believe is the most improved player in world football this year, and that's Ryan Gravenberch. I give Arne Slot massive credit for finding a role that has ultimately seen Gravenberch finally start to fulfill that tremendous potential we saw all those years back at Ajax. But as much credit as I give to Slot, I have to give a lot of credit to Gravenberch as well too, because to go from a box-to-box forward-thinking midfielder into the linchpin of Liverpool's midfield, the way he has kind of transformed his game, is such an impressive adaptation. Liverpool were chasing Zubimendi all season long, trying to find that defensive midfielder. The year before, of course, they were after Lavia and Caicedo. When this whole time, the answer may have just been at home. Ryan Gravenberch. I think physically he's been so dominant. Every single test that has been asked of him, whether it was United's midfield, whether it was Arsenal's midfield, whether it was Chelsea's midfield, whether it was Aston Villa's midfield, Gravenberch has answered every single call. And I said it in my last video, but I challenge you guys to name me in the Premier League right now a midfielder that, when receiving the ball from his center backs, is able to get it out of the first phase and with his first touch almost break the opposition press and carry the ball with the power and the directness that Gravenberch does. It reminds me personally of what Moussa Dembele used to do in the Premier League. At the current moment, I don't think there's anyone better at that particular aspect of being a midfielder than Gravenberch, and I've been so impressed with him. His midfield partner is going to be Moises Caicedo, who a year ago cost Chelsea Football Club £115 million, if I remember correctly. And I have to be honest with you guys, I was a critic of the signing, of the fee at the time. Not of the signing. The signing would suggest I didn't rate him. I knew he was a great midfielder, but the fee for me kind of made me like back off a little. Like, is he worth 115 million? And to be fair, I still hold on to that sentiment. I don't think a player of Caicedo's profile can ever be worth that amount of money. I think you can get what Caicedo does for a little less. However, I know in the modern age, you got to pay that amount of money to get that kind of player. I get that. For me, I don't really see midfielders of that ilk being worth over 100 million pounds. I think 100 million pounds has to go to like bona fide match winners of the elite level, the Salahs, the Viniciuses, those kinds of players. But that's not in Caicedo's control, right? The first year, honestly, I think especially the first half of the season, I think it took him a while to kind of get going at Chelsea. And granted, I think also in his defense, I think the partnership of Enzo Fernandez that Chelsea kind of persisted with for so long really wasn't doing any favors for Moises Caicedo. But this year, I think he has finally rediscovered his best form that saw Chelsea spend so much money to begin with. I think he's been Chelsea's best midfielder. I think he has been so good defensively. I think his passing has been excellent. And I think him and Lavia together have actually ousted Enzo from the lineup and, in my opinion, have elevated this Chelsea team to another level. I think Caicedo has been so impressive. And this year, I got no complaints. I got no critique. I think he's been exceptional. So I got Moises Caicedo and Gravenberch as my two deeper lying midfielders. And just in front of them is Cole Palmer. Now, there's been a little bit of discourse around Cole Palmer in the last few weeks about how effective he is in big games, notably after the Liverpool game, the City game earlier in the year, the United game, and then of course most recently the Arsenal game. But I just find the discourse a little forced because it was only like a month ago that people were literally saying, is there a team in world football that Cole Palmer doesn't get into? Is Cole Palmer the best player in the Premier League? Is Cole Palmer one of the best players in the world? I just sometimes find with football and with discourse in 2024, we live in a very consumerist society where you're only really as good as your last game. And I think with Cole Palmer, first of all, he's exceptionally young. And to ask him to kind of produce big moments in every single big game that he plays in, is a bit unrealistic in my opinion. And I think people are being harsh with it because you look at his performances last year against United. You look at his performances last season against City, most notably for me in the FA Cup semi-final where I thought he was brilliant, but even in the league, I thought he was very, very good as well too. You look at his performance against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, I think Cole Palmer has kind of put together enough of a big game repertoire that we don't really need to question how good of a player he is in the biggest moments. And I do remind you as well too that, again, just a month ago, the discourse around him was where does he rank amongst the best players in the world? And maybe that was a bit of a stretch in its own right, but there was a reason that conversation was happening. He put 4 past Brighton, and let's be real too, right? I think Chelsea are, at this current moment, the best side in transition in the Premier League. Maybe them and Liverpool. And that's mostly down to Cole Palmer's playmaking. I get it. Chelsea have tremendous speed in attack, whether it's Jackson, Neto, Madueke. But who do you think is the guy supplying the bullets for those guys? It's Cole Palmer. All you have to do is look at that goal that Cole Palmer expertly plays in behind Pedro Neto within 2 touches. Neto plays it into Jackson, goal. But that goal is created by Cole Palmer's inventiveness, his playmaking. And I think he has been the guy pulling the strings for this Chelsea team. Me personally, I still think at this current moment, he's been the best number 10 in the league. However, I have to give a big shout out as well to Dejan Kulusevski, who I think Ange Postecoglou has completely transformed from a touchline winger off the right to now a guy who in those advanced central areas is the one pulling the strings for Spurs. But I would give the edge to Cole Palmer. Now, personally, I think the front three picks itself. On the left, I think it's Luis Diaz, who again has been one of the more improved players in the Premier League this season. And I think the name of the game this year for Luis Diaz is efficiency. No one has ever been able to question Luis Diaz's ball carrying, his close control dribbling, his directness, his tenacity. I love the guy from a rival's point of view. I've always loved watching Luis Diaz. But even as a big fan, I would have had to say the last few years, the end product has always been to be desired, left to be desired. However, this year, I don't think that's been an issue. I think he's been so clinical. I think Arne Slot as well too is getting him into positions where he can bury chances at a more efficient rate. He's playing closer to goal. He's finding the net more often. I think he's been one of Liverpool's best players this year. And especially in the beginning of the season, he was the one really carrying the heavy load offensively for Liverpool Football Club. So he gets in on the left. Up front, I think it's that man, Erling Haaland. Now, the last few weeks, maybe Erling's sanity has kind of slowed down a bit for his standards. But let's not forget the way this guy started the year. He had people questioning whether he could break his own record that he set in the Premier League. He had people questioning whether he could score 50 goals in the Premier League, 40 goals in the Premier League. And hey, it slowed down a little bit, but would anyone bet against him? I wouldn't. He's still, for me, the best striker in the world. He's still, for me, the best goal scorer the Premier League has ever seen. And although it's slowed down to a level, he's still scoring goals, I still think he has been the standout striker in the Premier League this season. But let me give a shout out to Chris Wood. up to no good. This guy continues to prove that for him, age is just a number. And by the way, speaking of age is just a number, how about Danny Welbeck? 34 years old, still banging in goals for Brighton. Massively impressive. And then off the right, I'm sorry, it can only be one man. For me, the best player in the Premier League this season, Mo Salah, man. Oh my God. Goals, assists, chances created, dribbles, hold up. He is everything and more for Liverpool. And if there was any question marks about whether Liverpool needed to extend Salah past this season, I hope those questions, those doubts have been answered. This guy doesn't look like he ages. He takes exceptional care of his body. And every year, I think his game evolves and becomes more and more complete season after season after season. He is the most easy player to put in this list. I think he's been the standout player of the league this year. And you know, anytime Liverpool score a goal, I would put my house, my mortgage, on it either being scored or assisted by Mo Salah. His fingerprints are on everything good Liverpool Football Club do offensively. And to top it all off, the manager of the season so far, it can only be one man. It can only be Arne Slot. He's improved players that have come in. He hasn't brought anyone in himself. I mean, Bar Chiesa, but does he even exist at this point? He's made Liverpool better defensively. He's made them more compact in possession. He's unlocked that attack to another level that I already thought was high, but he's unlocked it another level on top of that. He's missed Alisson for parts of the year. He's missed Jota for parts of the year. And still, Liverpool on middle of November sit top of the Premier League and top of the Champions League. But big shout out to Hertzler, youngest manager in the league, has Brighton flying at the moment. However, it has to be Arne Slot. Who would have thought Liverpool mid-November would be top of both the Champions League and Premier League table? Massive, massive credit to Arne Slot and massive, massive credit to Liverpool Football Club. So let me know what you guys think about my team. Did I miss anybody? Would you have changed anything up? Are there any howlers in this team? I don't think so. No Gerard Piqués from the last list that you can kind of nitpick at. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Family keeps growing. This channel keeps growing. And I can only do it with your guys' help. So until next time, peace.